Recently, I flew on Singapore Airlines in first class from Melbourne, Australia to Changi, Singapore, and I did it for less than $300 out of pocket. For less than the cost of an economy flight, I spent 7 hours in luxury enjoying caviar, the service, and all the amenities. And in this video, I want to take you behind the scenes on what that flight was like, how I managed to do it, and everything in between. So let's get going. YouTube statistics tells me that a lot of people are new to the channel. So firstly, welcome. My name is Rafi, and on this channel, I talk about all things tech, travel, and tips and tricks. So if you want to lead your ideal nerd life, this is probably the channel for you. And today's video is obviously going to be one of my favorites, travel. So in August of 2025, I flew on SQ218 from Melbourne to Changi. Now this flight leaves Melbourne Airport at about 11 o'clock at night and lands somewhere about 4:35 o'clock in the morning in Changi. So it is a red-eye flight, but I was flying this one in first class, so I really didn't care about the times and I wanted to enjoy this experience. After booking the flight, I checked in online, and since I was only going for a couple of days, I managed to just have a carry-on baggage only. So even though there is a dedicated line for checking in, I skipped it entirely and went straight to security. Now, checking in online means that you don't get an express pass, so I don't know if you'd lined up if there is a fast track to get through security and customs, but because it was later at night, there wasn't really much of a line. After going through passport control, I was very excited to see what the Singapore first class lounge experience is going to be like. The lounge itself is fairly easy to locate in what I call the lounge dungeon of Melbourne Airport. It's underground, so it doesn't have any windows to the outside area. As it turned out, it's actually two separate lounges. There is a section for business class and there is a section for first class. Now, Singapore recently had its 60th birthday party, so there were decorations for that all over. And as I walked down the corridor, I was pretty excited about what this experience was going to be like. When I got in, I was a little bit underwhelmed. There was nothing wrong with the lounge per se. It was a nice, spacious area. However, it felt really dated. There was a sit-down restaurant area for meals with table service, a small buffet selection, as well as drinks, and a large amount of seating for you to sit and relax. When I got there, there was only one other person in the lounge, and before the flight, the maximum it got to was about 5. There's a decent selection of food and drinks available, and when I asked the staff what I should order, they suggested the beef burger, weirdly. The food is made to order, so it was fresh and delicious. I did avail myself to a shower before the flight, and again, the shower itself was a little bit cramped for a first class experience. I'm not complaining, but having been on some of these other lounges in the past, it just felt a little bit underwhelming, especially for a first class product. I did sneak in to the business class area, and that space is roughly the same size, but it has a lot more people. Whilst the lounge itself was a little bit underwhelming, I'm sure the true magic was going to be on the flight, and before long, it was time to board. Getting to the gate, there was a dedicated area for checking in and walking on to the plane, and the moment I stepped on, you could already feel the difference in product. The cabin supervisor immediately greeted me and introduced himself, as well as the rest of the crew that was going to be looking after the cabin, and I was escorted to my seat, which happened to be right up the front at 1A. Now, SQ218 actually uses the Boeing 777-300, so this is not the suites product per se, but this is a very exclusive cabin with only 4 seats. As I got settled in, I was offered bags to put my luggage into because there is no overhead cabin. It sits on the floor next to you, as well as a welcome drink and a hot towel. The crew began preparing for takeoff whilst I relaxed into the seat and started to explore. The seat itself is plush leather, makes it feel very elegant. It is wide. It's like a single bed in terms of its full width. If you're comparing it to business class, I would say it's about 2 business class seats side by side, or in economy, it's about the same as 3 economy seats. It's very nice upholstered leather. There's even a little back support cushion. To the right armrest, there are buttons for activating your lights, calling staff, and above that, a spot for your headphones. On this flight, you are given Bang & Olufsen noise-cancelling headphones to use. Underneath the armrest, there's a small sliding divider that reveals your in-flight entertainment control. And straight in front of you is a ginormous in-flight entertainment screen. To the right of that, there is a small door that reveals a vanity mirror and light. Underneath that is a storage shelf as well as a storage cupboard. Near the screen is the power point for charging your devices, as well as a HDMI port, so you can actually plug in your laptop and use the in-flight entertainment as a secondary screen. There's free Wi-Fi on board that cabin. The table tucks into the little storage shelf and can be pulled out and adjusted. To the left armrest, there is another pocket where you can tuck away a small device like a phone with a USB port there, so you can keep that charged. There's reading lights on both sides of the seat, so you can kind of cozy up on one side or the other and enjoy a nice read. As I settled in, I was offered a welcome drink. I had some sparkling water as well as one of their mocktails. We had a slight delay on takeoff, but I really wasn't complaining since, I was in first class. I was given an amenity kit as well as some slippers. In the first class product, this is provided by a French brand called Lalique. Then it was time to take off and begin the journey in luxury. After takeoff, the crew provided me with menu for the flight and asked whether I wanted to dine right now or closer to landing. I opted for the latter since I'd just eaten in the lounge. At this point, they realized they had actually forgotten to give me my pajamas for the flight. They rectified pretty quickly. As I went to get changed in one of 2 bathrooms for 4 people in this cabin, the crew made my bed. Now, the pajamas are very comfortable and soft. And whilst I was getting changed, I also explored the amenity kit, which comes in a very plush faux leather bag. Inside, there's a small perfume, some lip balm, some moisturizer, and an eye mask. Notably, there is no dental kit in there, but if you look through the toilets in first class, there's plenty of dental and other supplies there. And in a way, I like Singapore Airlines' approach to this because unlike other airlines that put everything into this kit, Singapore Airlines seem to recognize that the kit itself is going to be used in first class and they don't have to put everything in just this one packet. After I got changed, the moment I stepped out of the bathroom, there was a crew member waiting with a coat hanger waiting to take my clothes. I did set up a little time lapse for how the bed was made, and it turns out for Singapore Air, the actual bedding lives behind the plush leather of the seat itself. It folds down and becomes part of the bed. And as a result, you are actually quite elevated in the bed. Unlike other business classes, which kind of lie flat and slide you closer to the floor, this time you are actually a bit more higher up. This is when I realized why there is no cabin luggage space in this cabin, because otherwise it would feel a little bit cramped. The bedding was incredibly soft, and as I tucked myself in, I just wanted to watch a couple of movies, but realized I should probably head to bed because this was going to be a red-eye flight after all. I did have a quick look through the selection of entertainment available. There was quite a wide variety. It was time to head to bed. I put on my eye mask and drifted off to possibly the best sleep I've had in a plane ever. Now I woke what felt like 5 minutes, but it had been nearly 5 hours. I do have one complaint about the first class seat and the product in terms of sleeping. Firstly, the bedding is very plush and very warm, and without air vents, I feel like some people might get too warm in there. Secondly, the section of the seat that meets the underseat storage area, which is where your legs end up, that area doesn't sit flush. So I found that my legs were resting roughly sort of mid-shin area, hovering in the air. And I found that my legs would get a little bit sore, especially because I sleep on my side. Now, these are my little foibles, and it's probably just a me thing, but if you're paying for first class, I think you should know. The menu on the flight was quite extensive, and given that this is a sleeper service, it's also a little bit bizarre because on one hand you have things like scrambled eggs if you wanted to have breakfast, but then there's also beef noodle soup and caviar. Is it first class without having the caviar service? Even though it's 4:30 in the morning, that's what I went for, as well as the beef noodle soup. Unlike other airlines, in Singapore Air, if you're flying first, you are given an entire container full of caviar, as well as the condiments to enjoy. This felt very luxurious indeed. Straight after that, it was on to one of the most fragrant bowls of noodle soup I've ever had. I find it really amazing that they can pull off meals of this caliber flying 30,000 feet high. Beef noodle soup was indeed quite spicy and very flavorful. I have to say, this is very much a restaurant quality meal. I enjoyed a couple more of their mocktails, and before long, we were seeing the lights of Singapore. Even though we departed a little bit later, the pilot actually managed to catch up on the flight times, and we actually landed about half an hour earlier. After a smooth landing, it was time to depart and head on out and explore Singapore. What do I think about this overall? Firstly, I think if we break it down into the pre-flight, the flight itself, and the service, we can talk about a few different things. In terms of the pre-flight experience, the smoothness of getting into the lounge and everything was superb. However, the lounge itself is very dated and a little bit underwhelming for a first-class product, especially against their competitors. And actually, one of the things I did do is my flight there and back was both in first class. So I got to experience what the first class lounge in Singapore was like, and that is very different indeed. So do stay subscribed if you want to see a video comparing the two. Again, the seat in terms of space, privacy, and the product itself is fantastic. It doesn't have some of the bells and whistles that the Emirates and the Qantas of the world have with like a massage function or a mini bar in the actual seat itself, but the service is what separates Singapore Air from all the rest. The staff are just so attentive. In fact, my flight attendant, Selena, I believe her name was just so happy to actually help with some of the filming of these videos. Overall, I found that the moment I was about to ask for something, there was already a staff member already there. Overall, this was one of the best first class experiences I've had. I haven't had many, but it was fantastic. Now, you might be wondering, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, how did I manage to book it for just $300? And the answer, of course, is with frequent flyer miles. The flight in total cost me about 250,000 KrisFlyer miles, as well as about 250 Australian dollars in fees. This is for flying to Changi and back from Melbourne return, which is pretty reasonable. If you were to just book it straight out, that would be about $8,000. Now, how do you actually attain so many points? There is probably a myriad of different ways of doing it, but my way of traveling on these luxurious flights is to actually use the American Express Platinum Charge Card. Now, it is an expensive card and it might not be for you, but if you're a frequent flyer, then the travel perks might make it worthwhile, especially just for 1 year. There's usually sign-up bonuses of a few 100,000 American Express points when you sign up for the card. I'll leave a link below so that you can actually enjoy the same offer and we can share some points. What I like about the American Express is that the Platinum Charge Card actually has a wide network of airlines that you can transfer into. So I like to collect all my points into American Express and then transfer it out as I need them. The other perk you have is that airlines frequently have a transfer bonus. For example, as of recording, Qatar has an up to 40% bonus Avios transfer. So if I save everything into American Express and transfer when these bonuses come up, I get to maximize the value of my points. Singapore Airlines transfers at a 3-to-1 ratio. So for getting to 250,000, it would have been about 750,000 points of American Express that I had to transfer in. I found that the availability of Singapore Air Rewards flights is actually pretty good. I managed to book it only a couple of months in advance. Overall, it was a fantastic experience, and if you get a chance to, I highly recommend checking it out at least once. If you'd like to see one of my other flight reviews, click over here, and I'll see you in the next one.